Every year, brilliant minds come together for 1 week in the Sonoran Desert to showcase and celebrate the growing innovation, creative, and entrepreneurial ecosystems of the Southwest. Led by Startup Tucson and Ranch House Media, 10 West Impact Festival unites our audiences to gain the knowledge and inspiration they need to make a difference within their own careers and communities. Welcome to 10 West Talks, our podcast where we broadcast the 10 West mission and vision to the world.
This is Jessica Sueskind, today's host of the 10 West podcast and executive director of Tucson Young Professionals, the largest young professional network in Arizona. I am so happy to have Co-Jyotishi here with me today, who is a senior advisor for education, labor, and the future of work at New America and a Forbes contributor. I'd love to just start off, Shalin, if you'd like to just share a little bit more about yourself.
Well, first, Jess, thanks very much for having me. It's really an honor to be here at 10 West this year. I'm happy to talk a little bit about, my background. I am a policy researcher and a writer, and I focus on the intersection between education, labor, and technological innovation. I got my start in science and technology policy. I held different policy roles at universities and in think tanks, and I moved over to work actually with research universities. I was at the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, where my job was really to sort of align technology and talent development, working with institutions like Arizona State University and University of Arizona, really familiar with UA Tech Park and SkySong here in Arizona. Really thinking about, all the innovation that happens in research universities and how that affects people and affects labor markets. That work really sort of inspired me to dive a little bit deeper around the workforce implications. So, we're so interested in technological innovation and in funding R&D and catalyzing all this innovation all across the country. But what are the downstream impacts of that on people? How does it affect workers? How does it affect workforce development and career preparation? For young people sort of getting their start, but even incumbent workers, adult learners. So, it's that work that really brought me to New America, which is a think tank based in Washington, D.C., and we are committed to the renewal of the American promise in an era of technological and social change. We are an eclectic group of journalists and researchers and policy strategists and technologists, and our mission is public problem solving at the intersection of social change and technological innovation. And of course, for me, that really is at this intersection of emerging technologies, education, workforce development, and the future of work. So I've been at New America since 2020. I have had other sort of concurrent appointments while I was in this role, including serving as the first civil society fellow on the AI team at the World Economic Forum. I had launched with my colleagues a project that was actually looking at how we can harness the power of AI to make jobs better for people, how AI can advance job quality and improve working conditions rather than making jobs worse for people. Mm-hmm. So really taking a look at augmenting the worker of the future, thinking about how that happens on the ground. I also spent some time in the labor market analytics world. I was a non-resident fellow at New America, took a leave of absence for a while to work at the Burning Glass Institute, and had an opportunity to really take a more data-oriented lens on the future of work and the future of learning. And I've brought that back now in my current role, which is really leading our initiative on the future of work and the innovation economy. So I'm super excited to be at 10 West because a lot of the issues and the topics and the conversations that we're having in Washington, D.C. right now around technology and talent development, it's really communities like this one that are actually implementing that work on the ground in innovation ecosystems all across America. So that's a little bit about me. Part of my role is storytelling, so I do I'm honored to serve as a columnist at Forbes, where I cover workforce innovation. And really elevating the stories of those who have lived experiences on the issues that we work on is a high priority for our work at New America. So that's how the Forbes contributor hat fits into the equation.
Awesome. I am so excited about your keynote coming up this afternoon and just hearing more about those pieces about the future of work. I'm also curious in some of the policy and research work that you've been doing post-COVID and the way the workplace has changed with the autonomy that workers got when COVID happened and we all realized that you can productively work from home. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen and how you've seen that affect the workforce, especially with the contributions that AI and technology are making?
Absolutely. This is a really great question. I feel like every point in time you probably can make the case that this is really the inflection point of massive social change. But, I think it's safe to say that the pandemic was that upheaval, social and technological upheaval of our time that, was really disastrous, honestly, for a lot of communities and a lot of people. But one impact on the labor market that we're seeing persisting, and this comes from data points, whether you're looking at employer perspectives or worker perspectives, is this, sort of new realization around job quality. Job quality has entered the political lexicon in Washington, D.C. You saw during the pandemic, essential workers were really top of mind for lots of policymakers, really in the news, thinking about the trends that had followed out from the essential workers and sort of the pandemic movement around hybrid work has been a key part of what we've been looking at. Whether you look at social paradigm shifts like the Great Resignation or quiet quitting, or even tactical level changes in the labor market, public support for organized unions, labor unions, is at a record high since 1965, with 2 in 3 Americans supporting greater influence of worker power and labor unions in influencing the workplace. That change really was catalyzed by many of the frustrations that workers were able to harness around the pandemic. And we're seeing that really play out in terms of hybrid work and flexible work. And it's interesting that you mentioned autonomy. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that psychology pyramid we all probably remember from grade school. At the top of that pyramid, above safety and sort of thinking about the fundamentals of human existence, is self-actualization. We know that autonomy at work is a key part of that self-actualization. So I think it's a really exciting moment in thinking about how the future of work is being shaped to be one in which the pendulum between employers and workers is swinging a little bit more towards the middle. It's been a little bit on the side of employers if we look at the data for the last 20, 30 years, but we're really seeing this sort of transformation in the American worker and the American mindset. And I think that's largely because of the pandemic and sort of social change, but it's also due to technology, as you said. The widespread use of Zoom, for example, but even going beyond that, thinking about new models for the ways in which we work. We are seeing, it's very early days, but we are seeing examples of AR, VR being applied in different workplaces that we had previously never thought possible. The World Economic Forum has looked at this in manufacturing. If I were to talk to my parents, they would not think that manufacturing would be an occupation that could be done from home. But in fact, emerging technologies are unlocking new models for work in all industries, in healthcare and manufacturing, even these industries that have traditionally been more high touch and hands-on. So it's a really, really interesting moment. And it is a window of opportunity. There are risks involved, but I've been really heartened by the discussions that we've had with employers, with policymakers, with advocates and worker power groups, including labor unions, around sort of collaborative ways to shape a future of work worth working.
Yeah. With that, at Tucson Young Professionals, we're a membership organization, and we have individual members, but we also have a corporate group membership model where corporations can bulk purchase those memberships and offer them for free to their employees as a professional development benefit for them. And I think with that piece of employers investing differently in their employees and employees asking for that, we've seen that program grow exponentially over the last few years. We're up to like 31 local partners, and I'm talking to new ones all the time. And so with that, I think one of the things that we focus on is connection. And so it's this idea that in order to develop yourself professionally, you also have to connect in to your greater community, to other young professionals, to leaders to learn from. And I wonder how you see that connection piece maybe being lost, or how we don't lose it as we get to this more hybrid or more technology-focused future of work.
It's a really great question, and it really goes to sort of that risk factor that, I was mentioning at the outset. I think with all technology, especially now, the goal is to maximize benefits while mitigating the risks. And in the area of hybrid work, the loss of connection is a serious risk. Not just sort of professional advancement, but also just sort of the social fabric that holds together communities. There have been studies at this point that have shown instances of loneliness and depression spiking among those who have more limited interactions with their colleagues. They might be isolated, working from home for extended periods of time. And then, of course, in the standpoint of professional development, time and time again, skill survey after skill survey with business leaders show that it's not just your technical skills that command a wage premium in the labor market. It's also these soft skills. It's communication. It's collaboration. It's active listening. It's really working to connect with your colleagues and your partners in the workplace. And we are going to need to think a little bit more intentionally about that. I think this is a two-way streak. I think it is incumbent on decision makers in different organizations. I think it's incumbent on business leaders to think about how they might also upskill and gain this new skill set to lead in a digital, more hybrid age, which I think is a conversation that's still a little bit nascent. We are just beginning to see executive training move in that direction. But of course, it's also true that the younger generation, especially those just entering the workplace, are walking into a new status quo. And in large ways, you all are the first generation walking into this new status quo. So, I think there's going to be a need for workers to also think about how they support the transformation of workplaces by gaining the skills they need to collaborate more effectively in a hybrid world. For example, one thing that we've been really looking at New America is skills across the DEIA spectrum: diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. This is an area that I think is going to need more attention in the digital age. There have been studies that have shown that marginalized communities actually really benefited from remote work because there were fewer opportunities for microaggressions that might have taken place before the pandemic when everything was in person. But just the same, there have also been studies that have shown that the advantage you get from building connection with one another is doubly damaging for marginalized groups when they're fully remote and not able to have that interpersonal communication. And that matters because by 2050 in the United States, racial minorities, today's minorities, will be the majority. For the very first time, we have 5 generations in the workplace altogether. So there's an intergenerational component of the DEIA landscape. America has long been the country with the greatest number of immigrants in the country, but we're seeing that trend increase as the pandemic has sort of faded back, and immigration is on the rise in the United States, and that's especially important for here in Arizona, right? So
Absolutely.
I think thinking about DEIA skills in the context of hybrid work and how that feeds into that sort of connection piece that you're referring to is something that we're wanting to do more research on in the next couple of months here.
Yeah, I'll have to keep an eye out for when your research comes out. One of our focuses with TYP right now is on that diversity piece, and we're looking at diversifying our industry sector representation because we have seen the data and understand that as we do that, we will diversify across socioeconomic status and race and ethnicity and all of those things. Especially in Tucson, we have a large manufacturing population and Department of Defense, and we don't see that very well represented in our membership right now. So what you were talking about with the soft skills is really interesting for me, thinking through the programming that we could supply that would be of value to those industries. I'd love to hear a little more about your time with Forbes and maybe what's your favorite interview that you've done for those pieces that you've written, or a great experience with that.
Oh gosh, this is a great question. Oh man, it's so difficult to pick. I really enjoy the storytelling work. As much as I'm a data nerd, there's so much that you learn by just talking with folks who are on the ground, experiencing the things you read about, you hear about, you watch on TV, in the news, on social media. I think the interview that stands out for me the most is one that I had actually conducted as part of a project with the World Economic Forum, this project around thinking about how can workplace technologies be a win-win for workers and employers? How can it advance job quality while boosting productivity and cutting costs for employers, sort of the traditional goals of technology adoption. And I had interviewed Tim Noonan, who is the director of the International Trade Union Confederation. It's actually the largest sort of coalition of labor unions in the world. And, we were talking about the impacts of AI on workers. Tim, coincidentally, was also a member of the Global AI Action Alliance at the World Economic Forum, which is a sort of cross-sector leadership group that is committed to striking the balance between maximizing the benefits of AI while mitigating the risks. And it's industry, it's policy, it's labor, civil society all coming together. And one thing that really struck me about that interview is how Tim was describing what he has seen in his membership of unions. He said to me, unions are often characterized as technology Luddites, these organizations that are resisting technological change. They want to protect workers, and therefore they want to protect the status quo. And technology is a threat to the status quo, so we're going to block it. And what he told me is that, nothing could be further from the truth. What he has seen globally is that unions are actually very interested in AI and in technological innovation. They want a piece of the machine, as it's been referenced in some of the ITUC's materials. And I thought that was really interesting because here in the United States, we do not see that narrative, right? We've seen it as most recently with the United Auto Workers strike. There's this perception out there that unions are in fact technology Luddites, and they're not, maybe the optimal partners in thinking about, how to harness AI while mitigating the risks. But, if we look at other countries like Germany or Switzerland or even Singapore, works councils and labor unions and labor organizations actually play a really important role in being partners with employers to adopt new technologies. So I found that very striking. Going back to our first question, Jess, this notion of autonomy and sort of the voice of the worker and how that's been so elevated in recent years. Essential workers, quiet quitting, the Great Resignation, these themes, the public support of unions. President Biden became the first sitting U.S. president in American history to join picket lines with workers. I really think labor unions are going to play, a bigger role in the future of work conversation than they have historically in this country. And Tim's comments really was sort of seeded the thoughts. One just example from right here, in the United States, we look at what's happened in Hollywood with the Writers Guild of America, right? The labor union representing, Hollywood workers, where AI was the concern. And if you look at the agreement that had come about from, the negotiations, it was actually not the workers who were, resisting AI altogether. It was the workers wanting to harness AI in a way that strikes this win-win balance. So even the most high-profile examples we're seeing in the U.S., it does seem like something's changing in the milieu of organized labor and the AI and future work conversations. So that was a long-winded answer, but I was really inspired that conversation with Tim Noonan.
Yeah, I find that really interesting too. It's been fascinating to watch the labor unions pop up, with the Starbucks. One of our Tucson Starbucks was one of the first ones in the country to unionize, and so we've seen that happening. And all the things that we heard about the Postal Workers Union when their retirement might run out or whatever, all of those things. It's interesting, though, to think about that from the intersection that it has with AI and that piece of what's happening. Something that I feel like I keep hearing and that I imagine you could help debunk a little bit is this idea of AI taking over. But realistically, I think that AI has to be supported by the humans making things around it. And so I'm curious what you think about that, and if that is a real concern, or if it's more so this, as we continue to mitigate the risks and embrace it, it's maybe for the best.
It's a really great question, and I think it's, top of mind for everyone in Washington. President Biden signed this executive order on AI where striking that balance was really top of mind for a number of issue areas, even beyond the labor intersection. What we know from the data we have available, which I should caveat by saying is not great data, we do not systematically track automation rates very well in this country. Other countries do, and that's one area where a lot of federal agency leaders are thinking about shoring up our capabilities. AI is almost certain to eliminate some jobs, make them redundant, and it's almost certain to create jobs. It is creating those jobs, and it is destroying those jobs. I do think that the myth of a robot apocalypse is a little bit overblown. There was a now infamous study by some University of Oxford researchers. It was an Osborne-Frey paper that predicted that 40% of jobs would be automated away by about now, which obviously has not happened. And you could say, oh, well, maybe the pandemic had something to do with that. But a lot of academics and a lot of researchers in AI, both technologists and policy researchers, sort of refute that claim. I have heard this framing that I really like. I think we all will probably benefit from being paranoid optimists around AI, in that the genie is out of the bottle now. We have this technology, and other countries are harnessing it. So the United States has sort of put its support around expanding its AI leadership as well, federally. through the CHIPS and Science Act. A lot of people talk about semiconductors in the CHIPS and Science Act, but the science part of the CHIPS and Science Act was also focused on shoring up the technological capabilities of the country, including around AI. We are going to need to think about how we can enable co-design, this process of co-design of AI in all of its different instances. New America has this public interest technology program in partnership with the Ford Foundation and Hewlett Foundation that is really trying to, cultivate a generation of engineers, of computer scientists, of technologists who have the skills to nimbly and agilely, but substantively, implement user-centered design around emerging technologies like AI. And I've been really heartened by those kinds of examples. In fact, shout out to Arizona State University, the Center for Science Policy and Outcomes here, CSPO, has actually been a leader in the public interest technology sort of movement, and there are a number of faculty members who are leading the way on harnessing these new methods, these new approaches, these new tools to really ensure that win-win balance is struck. I think we need to blow up that methodological conversation to the systems level, at the federal agency level, in order to ensure that AI affects the labor market in a way that results in a better living conditions for the American people. And that's going to require intention. I don't think it's going to happen on its own. And I think that's what the conversation is really about now. We have the will, we have the interest, it sounds, but we need to focus on the implementation of that balance. So the executive order is out. Now it's incumbent on Congress to put some resources to support some federal action, and certainly states are taking action on their own. New York City became one of the first metropolitan regions to require, for example, employers to disclose worker surveillance using AI and advanced technologies. So, it's not just in DC. Local action is really important, sometimes even more important than what happens federally. So, I think it's that implementation leg that we're really going to need to focus on to really bring about a vision of, the future of work that the American people is behind and feels optimistic about. Maybe paranoid optimist, but optimist nonetheless.
Yeah, paranoid optimist. I'm going to use that. For that implementation piece that you're talking about, do you think that, or are you concerned, or are there concerns about the policy keeping up with? Like, is the implementation going to happen fast enough that we have the policies to protect the workers as this technology is rapidly being produced?
This is the question of the day. My personal opinion is that we do not have those resources in place now. The executive order, I think, was great in that it elevated the visibility of the needs, and it did put some balls in motion. But this is a very sort of in the weeds example. But the National Institutes of Science and Technology, NIST, within the Department of Commerce, is charged with developing this AI Safety Institute, right, to bring about regulations around responsible AI development. NIST does not have the resources to create such an institute, so it is going to take a bipartisan act of Congress to bring about the resources needed to empower federal policymakers, and the same is true, I should say, for the private sector. There's a great organization called the Partnership on AI, which is an industry-led coalition around the development and deployment of responsible AI, and PAI put out some great principles for shared prosperity, they call it, around AI, with lots of leading thinkers and doers in the AI space, even outside of industry, so you did have that third-party validation. And, organizations like PAI and the World Economic Forum are really trying to rally, the coalition of the willing. Not everyone is willing in industry, but the coalition of the willing in the business community to advance responsible AI too. I do think we're going to need resources to see through this implementation, and we're not there yet.
Yeah. Are there other countries that are doing that better, faster, that we can model off of? And is that happening, or are we doing it in a vacuum?
This is a really great question. So, Vice President Kamala Harris was actually in the UK for an AI safety summit recently. AI is top of mind for all world leaders. I think the U.S. AI policy conversation tends to be focused on China. Of course, this was central in the Chips and Science Act, but it's also because China has put in place an industrial policy that is really focused on advancing AI as fast as it can. And I think that's given a lot of policymakers concern, right, around sort of the ethical development and deployment. But there are other countries really involved in the AI ecosystem. Russia is very involved in the AI ecosystem. The EU, I think, has really put a lot of energy into AI safety and regulation. It remains to be seen whether the international collaboration on AI will play out with any implementation, let's say. Okay. There's certainly the dialogue. People are talking, but I think we're all waiting in the AI policy nerd community to see the walking behind the talking internationally.
Interesting. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to give you an easy one for our last question. What are you most excited about to do in Tucson while you're here?
Oh, man. That's a great question. Well, this is a nerdy answer, but I'm actually really excited to visit, colleagues at Pima Community College. We didn't touch on this, Jess, but actually a lot of what my research is focused on is how community colleges fit into the future of work and in regional innovation ecosystems and in supporting or expanding pathways to new jobs in emerging technology fields. And Pima has really been a leader in that conversation. I know later today we'll have a keynote here at 10 West with Ian Rorick, who's Vice Chancellor at Pima Community College. And I've just admired Pima's work from afar for so long, whether it's the first autonomous vehicle certificate program with Too Simple, or the ways in which Pima has taken a proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach to responding to workforce needs. I'm really excited to visit with faculty members and students and some of the administrators at Pima to really see this work on the ground. So I might call out that visit tomorrow as the thing I'm super excited for.
I love that. Make sure, if you haven't been to their automotive technology building, it's amazing. Like, just seeing it where they do that work and they're training the students, it's really cool to see. And I've loved watching Pima expand in that way. They're a community partner of TYP, so we get to be a part of that, and they are offering our memberships to their staff. So we're kind of helping with those soft skill side on their staff side of things. So thank you again, Shalin. It was so great speaking with you today, and we are grateful to have you here with us at 10 West. I wish you the best of luck with your keynote with Ian later today, and I hope you come back to Tucson soon.
Thanks very much, Jess.
Thank you.
10 West Impact Festival is produced by Startup Tucson and Ranch House Media. The 2023 edition is presented by the Arizona Commerce Authority and brought to you by Arizona Arts Live and Pima Community College. The 10 West podcast is made possible by Cloud Microphones. To learn more and view the full list of sponsors and partners, visit 10west.com.